Hello, you're welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a to-do list application using Python and MySQL connector Python. If you are new to Python, then this video is a great way to improve your skills in Python programming. And I'm going to be making use of Visual Studio Code for programming purpose. If you have any other preferred code editor, you can make use of it. So to get started, make sure that you have Python installed on your system, and also we need to install a package called, so let me open up my command prompt. The name of the package is MySQL connector Python. So pip install MySQL connector Python. This package will enable us to work with Python with MySQL within our Python script. So when you run this command, it's going to install the MySQL connector Python into your system, and you can download and install Python first of all from the Python official website before you try to install this particular script. And then you can download VS Code. It's a great code editor that many people use, but you can use any one that you prefer. Then we also need a exam server, which gives you access to MySQL and a database management system that can enable you to view your database tables like this and be able to create tables and all that. So these are the requirements for the project. With that said, let's get into the coding. To get started, I'm going to create a file here called todo.py. In this side, I'm going to import MySQL.connector. And I also say here, create a function to do the connection. So connect db function. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say connection is equal to mysql.connector.connect. This function is going to take some argument. First is the database. So I'm going to call the database Python test. Then the user is root. And the password is an empty string, and the host is localhost. So I'm going to start my MySQL and also start the Apache server. So after these two have started running, I'm going to click on admin. I'm going to create that database, which is this Python test, and then click create. After creating the database, the next thing I want to do is that I want to return this connection. After returning the connection, the next thing I want to do is define a function that will initialize the database, initialize DB. This is essentially going to create the database table for us. So I'm going to say connection is equal to connectDB, calling the connectDB function that is going to return the connection. Then I'm going to create a cursor. Cursor is equal to connection.cursor. So the cursor essentially is a tool that now enables us to perform database queries. So the first query I want to do, cursor.execute. The first query I want to execute is here. So triple comma here, then another triple comma. So within this triple commas, one opening triple comma and then closing triple comma. Very important that you type correctly. I'm going to type the query here. I'm going to say create table if not exists. So the name of my table is going to be to-dos. Now within that to-dos table, I'm going to define the table columns. So first of all, an ID field, which is going to be an integer. I want it to have a length of 11 characters. It's going to be the primary key, so primary key. Then it's also going to have an auto increment, so I want it to increment automatically as more records are being added. Then on that one, I want is the task. So I want it to be a string. I want it to be a varchar, which is essentially a string, and a character of 255. Then I also want, I will say not null. Then I also want the date, which is going to be the type of date. Also don't want it to be null, so I'll say not null. Then the next thing I'll do now, I will call the connection dot commit. So commit changes done by this query here. What I'll need next is go outside of this function. Remember, in Python there's no use of curly braces, so proper indentation. Right now I'm outside of this block, so it's on the same line. That means that I'm outside of this block. So what I want to do next is to call the initDB function. So to call it, I'll say initDB like this. Then let's run this. Hopefully there's no error. Good, there's no error, but it would be nice to have a message at the end. So after committing, I'm going to say connection dot close. That's to close the connection, and then print here that table created successfully. Tables created successfully, because there can be more than one table I want to create, but in this case I'm creating one table, which is the to-dos. So run this again. Can see that success message which says table created successfully. I need to be able to perform queries on the database to add to-do items, fetch to-do items, and as well delete to-do items. More like it's a CRUD application. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say define a function that is going to show tasks. This function will just say show tasks. So within the show task function, I'll need the connection. So I'll say connection equal to connectDB, which will return the connection for me. I'll need the cursor, which is equal to connection dot cursor. Then the next thing I need to do now is to show the task. So to do that, I'm going to say cursor. I'm going to say task is equal to cursor dot execute. I want to execute, select everything from to-dos. So this select function is to select items or read items from the database, and this asterisk here means all columns on the table, and then from to-dos, which is the table name, I want to say cursor dot fetch all. Okay, so first of all, this task is supposed to be here. So task is equal to cursor dot fetch all like this. And then the next thing I want to do, I want to check if not task, that means if the task, if there's no task, that it returns an empty array, meaning that there's no task included. So what I want to do now is I want to print your to-do list is empty. So your to-do list is empty. Then else, what I want to do is to loop through the array of to-do items and then display them. So to do that, I'll say for index to do in enumerate to-dos in enumerate task. So for index task in enumerate tasks, what I want to do now is to print. So right now I have the show function, so I'll call the show function here show task. Execute this. Okay, so I have an error. Okay, I'm calling this as a function, whereas it's not a function. Good. So everything works fine now. Your to-do list is empty, which is expected because we don't have any to-do item in our to-do table. And notice that the table here was automatically generated because we ran a query here to create the table for us. We need a query to also insert, or a function to insert. So I will say define add or create task. The create task function is going to create the to-do item for us. So first I will need the connection. So connection equal to connectDB, which returns the connection, and then cursor is equal to connection.cursor. We need to run the query. So cursor.execute. So within the execute function, I'm going to say insert into to-dos, which is the name of the database. Then the fields I want to insert, this to-do list has a column for task. So I want to insert task, and then as well as the date, which is essentially the due date. Then values. So in these values, I'm essentially passing a placeholder for the values. So %s and then %s. So why do we have two %s? Because we are inserting two values here: task, which is this, and then date, which is the place for the here is this. After that, the next thing we need to do is to pass a list here containing the values we want to. So I'm going to create two variables here, the task and then the date. Right now I don't have the task and date variable because I've not created them yet, and I don't want to hard code task and date. So to do that, I'm going to get the task and date as a user input. So I'll say task equal to input. Then here I'll write a message that says enter the task. Then the task or to do item, which is then here the date is equal to input, enter the due date. So here I want to give information to the user of the expected format. So I want it to be in year/month/day. Good. So I have the task and the date set, and it's gotten from the whatever value the user enters. That's why we are using the Python built-in function, which is the input function. After that, what we need to do next is we need to call connection.commit to commit changes to this database, and then close the connection.close. After that, I'm going to say write a message that says print task created successfully. Task created successfully. It will be nice to also show the particular task that was created. Task, put a quotation mark here, then within here pass the function, the task. So this is going to say task, and then the task that actually inserted into the database created successfully. Okay, now after this, I'm going to now call this create task function. So the create task function, click on, so here is asking me to enter the task or to do item. I'm going to say prepare for examination, for example. That's the task I want to perform, and then the due date 2025/January/24. I have an error. Say could not process parameters. So the error has to do with the query that we try to perform. So here is taking a list. Let me insert a tuple instead. So parenthesis, hopefully the error should be gone. Execute again. Prepare for examination. Good. That error was gone when I changed from list to tuple. So there's a slight difference between a list and a tuple. A tuple has parentheses in between. A list has square brackets. Now we have our to-do items created successfully. If you go back to our table, you see that a task has been generated here. It has an ID of 1, then this is the task, and then the date. Create another function that says delete task. This delete task function is going to handle deletion of the task on the database. So what I'll do now, I'll say connection is equal to connectDB, which returns the connection. Then cursor is equal to connection.cursor. Then I'll say cursor.execute. I want to execute delete from to-dos, which is the table name. Delete from to-dos where ID, which is the ID field or the primary key. So we want to delete by targeting the primary key where ID is equal to %s. Here I'll put a tuple here that says ID. Then create the ID. So say ID or task ID, which is even more descriptive. Task ID is equal to input, enter task ID. So since the task ID is a number, it's an integer, I can use what's called typecasting and convert this whatever inputs or ID the user enters into an integer. So I'll say integer. So I've converted into an integer, which is essentially a number. After that, I'll now say cursor or connection.commit, then connection, close the connection.close, and then print. This particular query actually returns the post, the ID of the post that was deleted. So I'll say deleted post ID is equal to this. So I'm going to print posts with ID, this ID here, deleted post ID has been deleted. Let's call the delete post function delete task. So calling the delete task function displays this enter task ID. If I enter an ID of 2, we have an error which says it must be of type list, tuple, or dictionary given. The major cause of that error is that we needed to use a list here, and which is what I did, and then it worked. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to remove this variable here and then put here task ID. Okay, and then try to call the right now, because it worked and deleted our to-do item. So let me call the create to-do function again. So create task, execute it again. Let me write here, this is a to-do item, then the date is 2024. Okay, this is a to-do item created successfully. Now let's call the delete function. Let's call the delete function to see whether it works. So delete task, execute this again. Now what's the ID of this to do task here? The ID is 2, but let me try to put an ID that does not exist, like 5 or 4. You say post with ID 4 has been deleted. Has it really been deleted? No, it has not been deleted. When we put an ID of 2, okay, let me execute this again. When you put an ID of 2, you show that post with task, I like using post, so task with ID of 2 has been deleted. So when we reload this, see that the task has been deleted. What we can do next is we can create another function to update the task. Define a function. Let me copy this function, the show task and the show task by ID function. They are going to be similar. So I'll say show task by ID, and then this is going to take an input. So let's say post or task ID is equal to integer input, enter task ID, enter the ID of the task to update. Okay, so here I now have the task ID. So instead of select, I'm going to say update to do's, set what do I want to set. The field I want to set here is the column I want to set the task. So I'll say set task is equal to %s. Perhaps I also want to update the due date, so I can say date is equal to %s. Task ID, and then date. So I'll copy this down, right here date is going to be a string, so don't so no need to typecast it. Good. So we have the task ID and the date, which we are going to, no, not really the task ID we want to update. We want to update the task itself. So here I'm going to say task, enter the task. Let's check the update task function. Edit task function. The name of the function here is show task by ID. I was trying to create, so this function is update task, not show task by ID. So update task. So let's call the update task function update task function. So enter the ID of the task to update. Right now we do not have any task we want to update. So what I'll do now is, so I'll call the create task function. Calling the create task function, enter the task or to do item. This is a to do item. Then the year. So it has been created. The major changes is that the date input was sending the wrong message to the user. So instead of saying enter the ID of the task to update, I'm going to say enter the date or the new date of the task to update. Okay, so when I do that, run this command. So the first, say enter the ID of the task to update, which is 3. Enter the description of the task to update, which is this is an updated task. Then the date of the task, 2025/January/25. So it's a task has been updated to this is an updated task. So when I reload the database, you see that this is an updated task. So we are able to update the database with the new information. The next thing we are going to do now is to create a function or a menu function. So say define a function called menu. This menu function is going to essentially show a menu to the user so that we can call the function, so that we can call the functions depending on the user input. So I'm going to say while true print select an operation to perform. The operation that the user wants, I'll say operation is equal to input, enter the operation to perform. Enter the operation. So here I'm going to say if operation is equal to, okay, so I have to be within this while loop, so indent it properly. So if operation is equal to 1, which means the user wants to show create task, so I'll call the create task function. And if the operation is equal to 2, that means the user wants to show task. If here I'm supposed to say else if. So here else if operation is equal to 2, 3, that means that the user wants to update task. Else if the operation is equal to 4, that means the user wants to delete task. Else else if operation is equal to 5, that means the user wants to quit. So I'm going to call the break. I'm going to print goodbye, and then call the break function, call the break to go out from that loop. Else, that means there's no valid input. I'm going to print invalid input. Please try again. So we're going to call the main function. So I'm going to say if underscore name is equal to underscore main. I'm going to call the menu function. So close this, execute this again. So we have the menu displayed here. Said select an operation to perform. So let me put a line break here. Okay, so again, say select an operation to perform. Let's say I want to show task number 2. It's showing us the task. Good. Let's say I want to create task number 1. So you say enter the task you want to create. I'll say this is a new task that has been created. So it will ask for the date. Let's say 2025/February/12. It said task, this is a new task, has been created successfully. Okay, let me show all the tasks. You can see that we have 2 tasks. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, then subscribe to my channel and turn on the notifications so that if I upload more Python tutorials, you will get informed about it. And also give this video a thumbs up so that more people will see videos just like this. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.